When he told me he loved me, she was trying on my wedding ring. I remember the sound before anything else. The faint jingle of the jewelry store door, the hum of the air conditioner, and his voice, warm and steady, saying, "Yeah, that's the one. She'll love it." At first I smiled, because I thought he was talking about me. But then the camera moved ever so slightly, and there she was. A woman I didn't recognize, standing under the soft light, her eyes sparkling as she slipped the same ring I'd chosen onto her own finger. It was all right there, in a little Instagram video. He didn't even hide it. The caption said, "Forever starts now." My hands were trembling so badly I almost dropped my phone. The word forever felt like a cruel joke, something fragile, mocking, slipping through my fingers like sand. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something, but instead I just stood there, frozen, staring at the phone screen as if maybe if I blinked enough times, the truth would rewrite itself. It didn't. He said, "I love you" to me that morning, and that afternoon he was shopping for forever with someone else. Normal life, set up. Before all that, I was just a girl who believed in good men. My name is Elise. I'm 31 years old. I work as an elementary school art teacher in a small town just outside Portland. My life wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, warm, predictable. My mornings smelled like coffee and chalk dust. My nights were quiet, filled with watercolor brushes drying by the sink and the sound of my fiancé humming while cooking dinner. His name was Andrew. And for a long time, I thought he was the safest place I'd ever known. We met 2 years ago at a charity art auction. He'd bid on one of my paintings, a small watercolor of a forest after rain. I remember him standing there, in that gray sweater, smiling shyly as he said, "I think I just bought your soul on paper." It was the kind of line that would have sounded cheesy from anyone else. But not him, not Andrew. His tone was sincere, quiet, almost reverent, like he meant every word. We fell fast, but it didn't feel reckless. He was grounded, thoughtful. He never raised his voice, never forgot to text me good morning. He learned my coffee order before I even had to tell him. He met my parents after 3 months. My mom adored him. My dad said, "He's a solid man." And in my family, that was the highest praise you could get. When he proposed, it was simple, intimate. Just the two of us on a pier at sunset. No flash mobs or big productions. Just him, kneeling, holding a small velvet box, asking me to be his forever. I said yes before he even finished the sentence. For months afterward, my world spun around that moment. Color palettes for the wedding, invitation fonts, playlists for the reception. My best friend Lana was my maid of honor. My Pinterest boards looked like someone's dream life. I told myself I was finally happy. And maybe that's why I didn't notice the small things. The moments when his phone would light up and he'd turn it face down. Or when he'd say, "I'm just going to help a friend with something," and disappear for hours. At first, I didn't even question it. Because love to me meant trust, and I trusted him completely. The first clue, suspicion, begins. It started on a Sunday. I remember because it was one of those lazy, golden afternoons when the sun spills through the curtains and everything feels soft. I was baking, banana bread his favorite, when his phone buzzed on the counter. He was in the shower. And I swear, I didn't mean to look. But when I glanced at the screen, I saw a name I didn't recognize. Sophie, just a text preview. "Can't wait to see you again." "Same place?" My heart stuttered. I wanted to tell myself it was harmless. Maybe a coworker, maybe a cousin. But that tiny sparkle emoji, it felt too familiar. When he came out of the bathroom, towel around his waist, hair dripping, I asked lightly, "Who's Sophie?" He froze for half a second, just a fraction too long, before saying, Oh, she's one of the consultants from work. We're finalizing a project pitch next week. I nodded, pretending to accept it, pretending my stomach wasn't twisting into knots. That night, he held me close in bed, whispered, "You worry too much, you know that?" I laughed, because that's what women do when they're afraid of the truth. They laugh to make it smaller. But I didn't sleep much. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that name glowing in the dark. A week later, he said he was going to Seattle for a business trip. 3 days. I helped him pack, folded his shirts, slipped a small note into his bag that said, "Come home soon. I miss you already." He kissed me, promised to call every night. He didn't. The first night, he said he was tired. The second night, his phone went straight to voicemail. By the third night, I was pacing the kitchen, counting the seconds between every unanswered ring. When he finally texted back, he wrote, "Sorry, long meetings. Everything's fine, but something inside me wasn't fine. Not anymore." That's when I did something I never thought I'd do. I checked his Instagram. Not his main account, but the one he rarely used. The one he'd told me he kept for professional connections. It was mostly empty. Just a few old photos from college, a couple of landscapes. But then I saw something new. A tag. A picture of him. Same gray sweater from the day we met, smiling beside a woman I'd never seen before. Her username was Sophie in Bloom. She'd captioned the photo. "Lucky to have you." And he'd commented, just one word. A red heart emoji. I remember the air leaving my lungs, as if someone had punched me. Still, I told myself, maybe I'm reading too much into it. Maybe it's innocent. Maybe she's exaggerating, because that's what hope does. It blinds you, even when the truth is screaming in your face. The next weekend, he came home with flowers, peonies, my favorite. He said, "For the best fiancé in the world." And I smiled because I didn't want to be the woman who snoops and accuses. I wanted to be the woman he chose, freely, wholly. He wrapped his arms around me, kissed the top of my head, and said, "You have no idea how much I love you. But the thing about lies is, they sound sweetest right before they break you." It happened 3 days later. I was at school, painting tiny paper flowers with my students when my phone buzzed. A notification from Instagram. "I, Sophie in Bloom, tagged you in a post." My stomach dropped. Tagged me? When I opened it, the world around me blurred. The laughter of the kids, the rustling of brushes, all faded into a dull ringing in my ears. It was a video. Her video. I pressed play, and there he was. Andrew, smiling, holding her hand. Inside a jewelry store. He leaned down, whispering something into her ear that made her blush. Then he said it out loud, clear enough for the mic to catch. "I love you. This one's perfect, just like you." The camera turned and she held up her hand. A ring, glimmering softly under the light. The same ring. Same design, same cut, same tiny rose gold band I'd chosen 3 months ago. The caption read, "Can't wait to say I do. Stuck forever starts now." And the worst part? The comments. "You two are made for each other. When's the wedding?" And his reply, "Soon. Sooner than you think." My vision blurred. The screen shook in my hands. I could feel my throat closing, my chest tightening like a fist. I locked myself in the supply closet. I needed air, but it felt like the whole world had been sucked out of that tiny room. I scrolled through the comments again, hoping I'd misread something. But no. There were pictures of them together at dinner, at a cabin, holding hands. Dates that matched the weekends. He said he was traveling for work. I think I whispered his name. Andrew? Like maybe he could hear me from miles away. It wasn't just betrayal. It was humiliation. Because while I was planning our wedding, he was already rehearsing for another. That night, I didn't confront him. Not yet. I went home, lit the candles in the kitchen like I always did, and waited. When he came in, he kissed my forehead like nothing had happened. "Hey, you cooked?" he said, his tone easy, casual. I just stared at him. At the man I thought I knew, at the man who'd promised me forever. "Yeah," I said softly. "Your favorite," he smiled, pulling out a chair. "You're the best, you know that?" I watched him eat, every bite a performance, every smile a knife. My heart wanted to scream, "How dare you sit there and lie to me?" But my body stayed still. When he reached across the table to squeeze my hand, I asked, "Who's Sophie?" For a second he didn't flinch. He didn't even blink, just swallowed and said, "I told you she's a coworker." I tilted my head. "She posted a video, with you, at a jewelry store." His fork clattered onto the plate. The sound was sharp, final. He looked up, eyes narrowing. "You went through my social media?" That's when I laughed, a bitter, shaking laugh that sounded nothing like me. "You're worried about privacy now? After you proposed to 2 women. He stood up, his chair scraping the floor. "Elise, you're blowing this out of proportion." She's not what you think." I slammed my hand on the table. "Then what is she, Andrew? Tell me." "Because she's wearing my ring," he didn't answer. Not really. He just stared at me, jaw tight, and said, "You're making this harder than it needs to be. Harder than it needs to be. As if breaking someone's heart could ever be easy." He finally confessed. Not because he wanted to, but because I refused to let him walk away without truth. He said he'd met her at work, that she was different, that she understood him. I asked, "Then why propose to me?" He looked down, silent, then said quietly, "Because I didn't want to hurt you." That was the moment I realized. Some people destroy you, not because they hate you, but because they're too cowardly to be honest. I felt something inside me collapse. All those nights I'd stayed up planning our future, every image, every dream, they all disintegrated in that moment. He didn't cry. He didn't apologize. He just said, "I didn't mean for you to find out this way." And I thought, then why did you make it so easy to? When he left that night, he didn't even take his toothbrush. Just walked out. The silence afterward was deafening. The clock ticked louder. The shadows felt heavier. I sat on the kitchen floor, my wedding binder open beside me, staring at the pictures I'd saved, flowers, dresses, color palettes, each one now a ghost of something that never was. At some point I realized I was shaking. And that's when the anger began to rise, slowly at first. Then all at once, I wasn't just heartbroken. I was furious because he didn't just betray me, he humiliated me. He made me a fool. And Sophie, she smiled in that video like she'd already won. That's when I decided, if he wanted to play with fire, I'd let the whole world see the smoke. But first, I cried. For hours, maybe days. I didn't eat, didn't sleep. My friends tried to call, but I ignored them. I didn't want sympathy. I wanted silence. I wanted to sit in the ashes and understand how love could turn so cruel. Then one morning, I woke up to another notification, Sophie again. A new post. This time it was a picture of her and Andrew at brunch, her hand resting on his. The ring, my ring, glinting in the sunlight. The caption read, "He's my always." I stared at that photo until my vision blurred with tears. Then I whispered to myself, not anymore. That day, something inside me shifted. I wasn't going to cry anymore. I wasn't going to beg or plead or wonder why. If the truth wanted to come out, I'd help it. So I gathered everything. Screenshots, messages, the video, the date stamps. I made a quiet little folder on my computer labeled Evidence. And then I called Lana. She came over within 20 minutes, hair messy, face worried. What happened? When I showed her the posts, her mouth fell open. Oh my God, Elise. He's actually with her, I nodded. Yeah, and she's wearing the ring. Lana's voice dropped to a whisper. What are you going to do? I looked her straight in the eye. I'm going to show the world who he really is. I didn't rush it. Revenge, I learned, isn't something you do in the heat of anger. It's something you prepare for, quietly, patiently, like a storm gathering over calm water. I wanted the truth to hit him when he least expected it. Not in a shout, not in a fight, but in silence. The kind of silence that exposes. For days I watched as Sophie posted pictures of their love story. Coffee dates, sunsets, hand-in-hand strolls. Each photo felt like another blade twisting in my chest, and every caption was a lie dressed in pastel filters. I noticed something. She tagged his business in every post. A local design firm, small but respected. They'd just landed a partnership with a charity I'd volunteered for, and that's when it hit me. He'd built his reputation on being trustworthy, honest, ethical. He was the poster boy for integrity, so I decided to let the world see the man behind that image. I started by gathering proof. Screenshots, timestamps, photos. I downloaded every post, every story, every video. I printed some of them, not out of necessity, but because there was something grounding about seeing the lies in physical form. Lana helped me. She was hesitant at first. "Are you sure about this?" she asked. "Once you do this, there's no going back." I looked at her, my eyes tired but steady. He made sure there was no going back the moment he put that ring on her hand. The next part was surgical. I drafted an email, not emotional, not angry, just factual, professional. Subject line: "For your awareness, potential conflict of interest regarding Andrew Collins." Attached were the screenshots, his posts, her tags, the overlapping dates that proved he'd been in a relationship with a client while engaged to another woman. No commentary, just truth. I sent it to his firm's HR director, to the charity partner, and, yes, to Sophie's own company email. I didn't include a single word about me. The truth didn't need narration. It only needed light. It took exactly 48 hours. The first crack came when Sophie's Instagram suddenly went private. Then a flood of whispers started spreading through mutual friends. By day 3, his company made a quiet announcement. Effective immediately, Andrew Collins will be stepping down from his role due to personal circumstances. I didn't gloat. I didn't even smile, but I did breathe. For the first time in weeks, I felt air fill my lungs fully again. Then came the unexpected part. He showed up. At my door, it was raining, hard. And there he was, standing under the flickering porch light, drenched, his hair plastered to his forehead. "Elise, please. Just let me explain." I opened the door just enough to see his face, not enough to let him in. He looked smaller somehow, softer. Not the confident man I'd once loved, but someone stripped of every excuse. "Explain what, Andrew?" I said quietly. "That you got caught?" He sighed, rubbing his face. "You ruined my career." I laughed softly, bitterly. "No, you ruined your career. I just stopped hiding it for you." He stepped closer, his voice trembling. "You don't understand. She meant nothing." I was confused. Stop! I raised a hand. "Don't insult me with that. You weren't confused when you were holding her hand in that jewelry store. You weren't confused when you looked me in the eye and said you loved me." He swallowed hard, eyes wet. "I made a mistake," I nodded slowly. "You made many." For a moment, the only sound was the rain hitting the porch roof. Then I said softly, "You should go." He hesitated. "Elise, please. I don't have anyone else." And that's when I realized the cruel truth. He wasn't sorry for losing me. He was sorry for losing the version of himself that looked good standing next to me. So I whispered, "Now you do." And I closed the door. After that night, I didn't hear from him again, but the world did. The story spread, not as gossip, but as quiet murmurs through our community. People began to piece it together on their own. No one needed me to say a word. Within a week, Sophie had deleted her account. Mutual friends stopped mentioning him altogether. And that silence, that collective turning away, was louder than any revenge I could have planned. Still, I didn't feel proud, because revenge doesn't heal you. It just keeps the wound open long enough for everyone to see it bleed. One evening, a month later, I walked past the jewelry store. The same one from the video. In the window, under warm golden lights, was the same style of ring. For the first time, I didn't feel pain looking at it. Just distance. It wasn't my ring anymore. It was just metal and glass, a symbol I no longer needed. That night, I opened my laptop, deleted the evidence folder, and emptied the trash. Lana texted me, "You sure you're ready to let it go?" And I typed back, "Yeah, it's done. He's already living his consequence. I don't need to live there too." A week later, a letter arrived. No name on the envelope, but I knew the handwriting. It was from him. It said, "I'm sorry for everything. I don't expect forgiveness. I just hope you find peace. I don't deserve to be part of your story anymore." I folded the letter, placed it in a drawer, and left it there, not out of anger, but because sometimes closure isn't about answers. It's about choosing not to reopen the wound. In the weeks that followed, I started painting again. At first it felt impossible. Every color reminded me of something. The blue of his shirt, the gold of that ring. But slowly, the colors started becoming mine again. I painted a piece called The Undoing. It was just a woman standing in the rain, letting go of a red ribbon that blew away in the wind. At the art fair that summer, someone bought it. When they asked what it meant, I said, "It's about freedom, about realizing you can forgive yourself for loving the wrong person." For the first time in a long time, I felt whole. Not because I'd won, but because I'd stopped needing to. In small towns, rumors spread like perfume, faint at first, then lingering long after the source is gone. By the time summer rolled into autumn, everyone seemed to know. Not the ugly details, but just enough. Enough to make people glance at me with that mix of sympathy and curiosity. At the grocery store, Mrs. Lang from 2 doors down stopped by my cart. "You're such a strong young woman," she whispered, touching my arm. "Some men just don't know what they've lost." I smiled politely, though her words settled heavy in my chest. Because strength wasn't what I felt. It was survival. Quiet, lonely survival. But sometimes, that's what strength looks like. A few weeks later, the art fair committee asked if I'd like to display more of my work at the fall exhibition. At first, I wanted to say no. I still felt fragile, like if someone asked too many questions. The pieces of me I'd glued together might fall apart again. But then I remembered what my mother used to say. "If you can't speak your pain, paint it." So I said yes. I spent every evening in my little studio. The windows fogged from steam, the soft crackle of rain against the glass. I painted what I couldn't say out loud. A woman standing in a river, washing her hands clean of smoke. Another walking through a burned forest, with light breaking through the ash. Each painting was a confession. A way to bleed without reopening wounds. And when I stepped back from them, I didn't see heartbreak anymore. I saw healing. The night of the exhibition, I wore a soft gray dress, the same color as the sky before dawn. The gallery lights shimmered against the paintings, the scent of coffee and varnish filling the air. People came. They looked. They asked questions, but one moment stood still in my memory. A young woman, maybe mid-20s, stood in front of The Undoing. She stared for a long time, then turned to me, eyes glassy. "Did you go through something?" she asked softly. I nodded. "Yeah, something that taught me how to let go," she swallowed. "Me too." And just like that, 2 strangers, connected by pain, standing under the same quiet light. That's the thing about heartbreak. It makes you realize how many people are quietly carrying their own. Later that night, as the crowd thinned and I was packing up, I noticed a man standing near the back, tall, hands in his pockets, looking at one of my newer paintings. He didn't look familiar, but there was something calm about the way he studied the piece. Patient, unhurried, as if he wasn't there to buy anything, just to understand. When he noticed me watching, he smiled. "You painted this?" I nodded. "Yeah, it's called After the Storm." He tilted his head. "It feels peaceful, like she's tired, but she's okay." I smiled faintly. That's exactly what I wanted it to feel like. He looked at the painting again, then said quietly, "You must have gone through something hard to paint peace that well." I didn't answer that. But something about his words, gentle, not intrusive, stayed with me. He introduced himself as Noah, an art curator from the city. We talked for a few minutes about colors, light, and how sometimes art is just therapy that other people get to see. He asked if I'd consider submitting my work for an upcoming showcase. I said maybe it wasn't a romantic moment. It wasn't supposed to be. It was just new air. And I didn't realize how much I'd been suffocating until that night. Around that same time, I got an email from Sophie. Just her name was enough to make my stomach twist. But I opened it anyway. "Elise, I wanted to say I'm sorry. I didn't know about you until after. When I found out, I ended things. I should have reached out sooner, but I was ashamed. I know you don't owe me forgiveness, but I wanted you to know the truth." I read it 3 times. At first, anger rose. How could she not know? But then I remembered her face in those videos. The innocence in her smile. Maybe she didn't know. Maybe, like me, she believed in a man who knew how to lie beautifully. I didn't reply. But I didn't hate her anymore, because she was just another chapter in the same cruel story. By winter, my world had quietly rearranged itself. I'd moved to a new apartment, smaller, but brighter. My mornings smelled of cinnamon oatmeal and peppermint tea instead of coffee and heartbreak. I'd started teaching weekend art workshops for women recovering from divorce and betrayal. We painted, we cried, we laughed. Sometimes we didn't talk at all. We just let color speak for us, and every time one of them said, "I feel like I'm getting myself back," I felt a small piece of my own heart heal. Because maybe that's what healing really is, helping someone else do it too. One day my father visited. He's not a man of many words, but as he looked around my studio, he said quietly, "You seem lighter." I smiled. "I think I am," he nodded. "You know, your mother used to say forgiveness isn't for them, it's for us." I looked at him for a long moment, then said, "I used to think forgiving him would mean saying what he did was okay. But now I think it just means I don't want to carry it anymore." He smiled faintly. "Then maybe you've already forgiven him." That night I took out the letter he'd written, Andrew's letter. I read it one last time, then folded it neatly and burned it in a small bowl on my balcony. The paper curled, turned to ash, and lifted into the cold air. And with it, I let go. Not just of him, but of the version of me that thought love had to hurt to be real. Spring came early that year. One morning, I walked past the park where we'd once taken engagement photos. The cherry blossoms were in bloom again, pink and soft and impossibly alive. I sat on a bench, watched the petals drift down like confetti, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I'd lost something. I felt like I'd found something, myself. A few months later, I got another message from Noah, asking if I'd consider featuring my work in a city gallery. I said yes, and on opening night, as I stood in that bright white room surrounded by people who didn't know my story, just my art, I realized something beautiful. The woman in those paintings wasn't broken anymore. She wasn't defined by betrayal. She was simply alive. When people asked me how I moved on, I'd say, I stopped waiting for an apology that would never heal me. I gave myself the peace I kept expecting from others. Because sometimes healing doesn't look like justice. It looks like standing in front of a mirror and saying, "You're enough, even after everything." There's a kind of quiet that comes after the storm. Not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of peace. It's like when you've been holding your breath for too long, and finally you let it out. That was me. The truth is, I never got the ending I thought I would. There was no apology that fixed it all. No movie moment where he came back and suddenly became the man I fell in love with. And thank God for that. Because if he'd come back, I might have taken him in. And I would have spent the rest of my life mistaking pain for passion. Sometimes, God doesn't close a door to punish you. He closes it because you were standing in a burning house, calling it home. And that's something I had to learn the hard way. When people ask me now, "Do you still think about him?" I tell them, yes, but not the way I used to. I think about him the way you think about a storm you survived. You remember the sound, the fear, the wreckage, but mostly, you remember that you made it through. He was a chapter, but I'm the book, and the story didn't end where he left me. It began there. I still wear a ring on my finger sometimes. Not that ring, of course. Just a small silver band I bought for myself. It doesn't mean taken. It means whole. Every time I look at it, I'm reminded that I don't need someone to promise me forever, because I finally learned how to promise it to myself. If you're listening to this, and you're sitting in your own kind of heartbreak, wondering how someone could say, "I love you," while loving someone else, I want you to hear this. It wasn't your fault. You didn't lose because you loved too deeply. You lost because someone else couldn't meet you there, and that's not on you. So cry if you need to. Yell if you must. But when the tears dry and the ache settles, promise yourself one thing. You'll never let anyone convince you that being chosen is the same as being cherished. Because one day, you'll look back and you'll see that losing them wasn't the end. It was the beginning of coming home to yourself. My name is Elise, and this was the story of how I learned that revenge doesn't bring peace. Forgiveness does. Not forgiveness for them. Forgiveness for me, because when you finally stop trying to rewrite what broke you, you make space for the parts of you that are still waiting to grow. So tell me, sweetheart, if someone showed you who they really were, would you still fight to keep them? Or would you finally let go and make room for yourself? Let me know in the comments. And if my story found you at the right time, I hope you'll stay a while and remind another broken heart that peace is possible.